Good morning. Welcome to the Drummers Education Connection, everyone. I'm here with two very good friends and amazing drummer educators, Jim Royal in Connecticut, Chip
Hello,
Ritter, Chip Ritter in Tucson, Arizona.
Hello.
And I'm here in the Bay Area. And today is our 80th episode. We've been doing this 80 weeks in a row, coming to you with content, doing drummers, talking about topics related to drumming and education. And today we are going to talk about auditions and auditioning. I had the experience as a teacher this week where I had two of my students who both auditioned for the same high school jazz program, which is a very reputable competitive program here in the Bay Area at a top high school jazz program. And one of them is just a monster drummer, and he actually got into the top ensemble as a freshman, which is pretty much unheard of. So he just aced it. And the other one didn't get into the low beginning band. So he, even though he prepared and worked hard for it, he didn't get into the program this year. He can only apply next year. But I thought this might be a really good topic for us to talk about, both as educators and as professionals. We've been on, many of us have been on both sides of the audition table, where we're trying out for bands and getting in or not getting in, or for programs. And now, of course, Jim especially auditions drummers for his ensembles in the Jim Royal Drum School. So I thought this would be a good topic we could share some insights about. And of course, we're always open to hearing your input. So if you have any questions, feel free to, or comments or things you want us to focus on, chime in on the comments and we'll get to it. I wanted to start by asking you guys, as educators, as teachers, how can we, first off, best support our students who are auditioning for ensembles or programs? Jim?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, it's a big question that we have to deal with at the studio all year long, because it's not just about us getting students ready for our own ensembles and level, but it's, oh, we're trying out for the jazz band, just like you described, for September. And then you have the regionals and everything. It's like it's all right at the same time. So the first thing is, whether it's somebody on the younger side in middle school or in high school, is trying to get them to put everything into perspective of the priorities of what comes first, so they're not stressing out about all of it at once. And I think that the bigger thing is that we start it early enough. And Ben, you just made me think of that we're coming up on our, we just did our steel pen concert last weekend. And then in 3 weeks, we're doing our recital. At the last week of our semester, we hand out the audition music for all the different levels that last week of the studio semester. So everybody has the material from, say, like the third week of June, and the audition's not till September.
Yeah, plenty of time to prepare.
So nobody's going to say, oh, I didn't have enough time. Now, you have a lot of obstacles, and I'll use Johnny or Kathy, well, they went to camp for 4 weeks.
Right.
They're in and out, but I'll always say, it's okay. We could still make this work. And some parents will even say, hey, can we double up lessons, et cetera, et cetera. And we try to support it any way we can, open up the studio all the days that we're here, that anybody can come in and practice, because there's those obstacles too. If it's drum set or snare drum, most students will have that at home. But if they have to practice a 4-mallet piece, timpani, anything else for our auditions, some may have a marimba, but otherwise they have to come in. We have to give them the resources. So it's about resources.
That's really good.
We have to give them everything we can to make them be successful.
And I like what you mentioned about, preparing well in advance. So like for this particular high school program, they release the audition materials about 6 weeks ahead of the audition. So everyone has sort of a fair, the same amount of time to prepare. But it's pretty much maybe 75% the same audition year to year. So, as an instructor who's had many students go into that program, I know what they need to be able to do for the audition, even if I don't know the specifics. We don't have the piece yet, the prepared piece. We don't know the tunes they need to learn, but we know what kind of thing they need to do. We know they need to be good at chart reading. We know they need to be able to play a bossa nova and a mambo and a swing. And so those are things you can work on. We start working on those months ahead, or sometimes even years, depending on what they're into. Chip, how about you?
Well, mostly my auditions come from students that are going into junior high or high school band. And I like to try to just make sure that they got the fundamentals down and they're familiar with the material. And, it comes back down to practice and preparation. As much as they can get, the more prepared they can be, the better chances they have.
Right. Of course. Another thing that comes to mind for me is when I've had students who are auditioning for a symphonic band or concert band at their school, which is a different animal, obviously, from the jazz band audition. That's almost always just a prepared piece, just a one shot, play this snare etude, and here's the metronome marking. And I get students I had a student come in 3 weeks ago, and she had forgotten about the audition coming up, and oh my God, it's next week, and I haven't prepared, and I forgot to tell you about it, and here's this piece, and the metronome marking is 120, and there's no way I'm going to be able to play it that fast in a week. And I said, you know what? Don't worry about 120. If you play it clean at 90 or whatever you can do, that's much better than fumbling and flailing around at 120. And it shows that you can read, it shows you've got good technique, but you just haven't put enough time into it to get it fast enough. And she did that, and she got in, and it was no problem. So
exactly.
It can be very intimidating, I know, for students. You get this list of materials or things you need to prepare. And, the thing you have to remember, one thing that's important is that you're not just auditioning for the band, you're really auditioning, competing against whoever else is auditioning, right? So it all depends on the landscape of how many other drummers there are, how experienced they are, how many slots are open in the band. Jim, when you have auditions for your top steel pan ensembles, and I know you have multiple levels of those, and we'll ask you about that, but the kids who are in the program, let's say the top band, the A band, in one semester, are they automatically in the next semester, and then there's certain spots that open up, or does everybody have to audition every time?
Currently, once you've made A, you're in. And again, it's rarely ever happened where I've had to reevaluate someone. But on occasion, it could be someone that got in by the skin of their teeth, and it's like you're kind of on probation. You know what I mean? And if you show me that you can't handle it, I mean, here's an example. A had 5 selections they played over the weekend, and none of it was, just playing Jamaica Farewell. I mean, right. One was a Mozart piece, which we did as a soca, you know what I mean? And it was very busy. We did one of those Tracy Thornton in-your-face rock pieces with a bunch of 16. I mean, so it could be pretty intense. So we have to evaluate if someone really isn't cutting it. But that rarely happens because you audition for a reason. You just didn't do it because, well, let me see if I'm going to check this out and see if it works for me.
Right.
You know what the program's all about, and your goal is to be there, stay there, and go all the way through. And if someone doesn't make it, that like this year, I think we're going to have a bunch of kids that are going to audition from the C group and actually audition for A because I think they could do it. And if I always say to them, if you don't make A, that automatically puts you in B. So I want them to just feel you're going to be successful no matter what, and encourage them to reach for that other height. It's only going to make them better. So we kind of handle it that way if it has to be. Yeah.
I had a student once who, as a junior, had made it into the top jazz band in his high school. And, if you'd asked my opinion at the time, I would have said, yeah, I don't think he's quite ready. I don't think that's usually the caliber of drummer that they let into that top group. But he got in, which I was very happy about. And, I told him, I was like, look, you want to, that's great that you got in, but you want to keep working hard because you want to rise to the occasion and excel. And then, of course, there's next year, right, to prepare for it and to continue to develop for it. And the next year, he got demoted. And it was really because he didn't work hard and he was devastated. And I said, you know, I didn't tell him I didn't think he deserved to be in it the first time, but I was like, well, it wasn't shocking to me. And so, you know, that's another thing to consider is that, you know, getting the gig is one piece, keeping the gig is another.
I completely agree with that. And the word I'm thinking of is complacent.
Yeah.
You get complacent and you get comfortable and you think, oh, I'm in, everything's fine. And I tell them that all the time. And if a student was on the border of getting in, but they did get in because they worked hard, I'm like, you have to continue to show that director that you deserve to be in that group.
Right.
And if you do that from week to week, you know, concert to concert, you're going to be fine. You're going to keep getting better. Otherwise, you're going to fall into that category. But you know what? That's got to be a great lesson for that student.
Yeah.
And so that's a part of learning, and sometimes that happens. But you know, and it's happening on our side as well. So I completely agree with that.
I had an experience several years ago. I want to ask you guys your take on, or maybe, you know, share your own experiences related to it. I had two students. It was right around the same time who were both going for the same high school. It's this high school jazz program, and one of them had been in the beginning band for 2 years, so she was a junior, and she, you know, the expectation is that you get in and you keep rising, you keep working, you keep rising toward the top, even if you don't necessarily get into the top group, which is really the elite group that not everybody makes it into. They only take 2 drummers, and it's a school of several thousand kids, so it's competitive. She was in it for 2 years in the first band, level 1 band, and auditioned, you know, to make it up to the next one with all her peers, and all her friends got into the next level. And there was an incoming freshman who was her cousin, who was a good drummer but had not a lot of experience playing jazz. And he asked her for some help, so she helped him, you know, learn to play some jazz stuff. And he ended up getting the advanced band over her, and she was absolutely devastated. And she got stuck staying in the same band for the 3rd year in a row. And she was so devastated that in spite of everything I tried to say to console her and, you know, keep it in perspective for her, she quit the jazz program. She quit drums. That was the end of it for her. It was devastating. It was so demoralizing for her. That was it.
So demoralizing for her.
It was brutal. Yeah. And I felt terrible for her, but there was not, you know, I did everything I could. And as her instructor, I had another kid right around the same time who auditioned for the program, didn't get in the first year. And instead of feeling defeated because all of his friends had gotten in, he decided he was going to use that as, and he worked his butt off that next year, got into the program as a sophomore, made it into the top band as a senior. So, you know, there were 2 stories with a similar, similar experience or similar obstacle, right? That sting of not getting in when all your friends get in and you expect to get in. You've been doing it for a long time, whatever. But they each handled it very differently. One of them was defeated by it and gave up. The other one took it as motivation and rose to the occasion and used it as an opportunity for growth. How do we as teachers best support that? How do we help kids use it as motivation for growth and you know, while at the same time understanding and being empathetic about how bad it feels to not get in?
I have a question for you on that scenario. The student who,
Oh, I didn't hear, Jim, you're breaking up.
oh, can you hear me now?
Intermittently. Can you try one more time?
This together.
Chip, I'm not hearing him. Are you hearing him?
No, he broke up. I couldn't hear him.
Jim, you're glitched out. You're frozen right now.
You
want try one more time?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. The student you were referring to that stopped altogether.
Yeah.
Did that student not work hard and prepare?
She did work hard and prepare.
Okay. All right. Because if that's the case, I mean, we have to do our best to just pick them up.
Yeah.
Right. And I know that you probably did, but sometimes it's just within someone that you could do everything you can to give them as much inspiration and pick me up as you can. But sometimes, even though we're going to wear it on our sleeve, there's only so much we can do, and they're going to make that final decision, and it's really sad. But you know, that's a tough, really tough question on, how do you dig that person out? Sometimes they're so far gone that they're just like, nope, I'm done.
Right.
And
right.
Did you find that you felt that that student was feeling that way along that journey, or it just suddenly hit?
I knew that it was going to be bad. I knew she would take it, be really, really, really hard blow to her. But her attitude was great all along up until that point.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're drum instructors. You can say we're part therapists, but I do think it has something to do with personality. And people are people, and sometimes these experiences are going to harden them and strengthen them, and sometimes maybe they'll learn a different kind of lesson, and they go in a different direction.
Right.
And I think that's a good reminder for us too, as professionals and as players. And I'd love to hear your guys' experiences as your own, playing as professionals, auditioning for groups and things. Sometimes you get the gig and sometimes you don't. And boy, if you got every gig, I mean, I don't know any drummer who got every gig they ever auditioned for.
Right.
Usually there's one spot, and that's it. You're either in or you're out. And sometimes it has things to do with nothing. Has nothing to do with your drumming sometimes.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely. I was in California auditioning for a band. It was a famous band, and there was a long line of drummers in the hallway. And I went in there and I did my thing and I did the best I could. And I went back out, and the next guy behind me had all these tattoos and the clothes and the look, and everything was dialed in. And it was apparent to me that that's probably part of what I was missing, and I didn't have it, and I didn't get the gig. And I remember feeling so dejected by it, and so crushed by not getting that audition that it shut me down for a couple months. You know what I mean? Threw me into like a depression. So I can relate to a student that's got an audition that they failed at. And it's one thing as a teacher that I have to remember is I've got to be encouraging, and I've got to remember what was that spark that got them into drumming in the first place. Yeah. I want to stay in touch with that and keep them pumped up.
That's really well said, Chip. And I think it's important to remember that every one of those things that you try for is just another opportunity, and you learn from the experience. Right. Even if you don't get it, you learn something. And sometimes, you learned in that particular one, I didn't look right. I didn't have the right tattoos for this gig or whatever.
Exactly.
And sometimes that's how it goes. And, one of my friends put it really well. He said, you can't worry about the things that are out of your control. All you can worry about is what you're able to do to put yourself in the position where you're most likely to succeed. Doesn't mean you're going to succeed. Well, I mean, first and foremost, as we all agree, it's being prepared, right? You don't go into audition half prepared. You go in there, knowing everything and extra on top. You have practice with a metronome. I got a great story for you guys. I don't think I've shared this one before, but it is in my book, so I know you guys maybe have heard of it. I had a colleague, another professional drummer, really fine drummer, great educator as well. We'll have him on the show one time. And he auditioned for a pretty well-known band in California. I mean, you guys have heard of them. Let's put it that way. They've toured around the world, and not huge, but you got one of their CDs in your collection somewhere. And I'd heard about the audition too, and I considered auditioning for it, and I decided, it's not my favorite. not my favorite band. I don't know. Even if I got the gigs, would I want to give up everything to go on tour with these guys? Probably not. Let me better. Someone should audition for that gig who really wants it, right? So I felt good about my decision not to audition, even though it would have been a really good feather in my cap kind of thing. So my friend got wind of this audition, and his eyes popped out of his head. He's like, "Oh my God, that's my favorite band. That's like my dream gig to play with these guys." Like, oh, perfect. I put him in touch with the musical director. He prepared so hard. They gave him a list of songs that they wanted to potentially choose from to play. I think it was like 8 songs. He learned like 3 albums. Not only did he learn them, he hired a bass player friend, a professional bass player, to come practice the tunes with him. And he would record his track and then overlay it on Pro Tools with the original, just to see where there are spots where he would tend to rush or drag.
Wow.
Right.
That's heavy.
It's heavy, right? He was like, this is it. This is my opportunity, right? If this is the thing that I really want, I'm going to go in there, do the best I can, and be ultra prepared, put all my whatever diligence into this. And then, I don't get the gig, but at least I can't look back and say, I wished I had tried harder, right? It wasn't my fault that I didn't get the gig. So he goes into the audition. They call him the next day. They offer him the gig. He's elated. It's fantastic. And they say, "Oh, we're going to go on tour in a couple of months. We're going to do a couple of local shows first, just to get warmed up with you, etc." The day after that, he gets another phone call from the band, and they say, "Look, man, we're so sorry. There's this other drummer who has expressed interest in playing the gig with us, playing the tour, and this guy's a pretty well-known drummer. You'd have heard of him, right? I'm not going to name any names. And so we're really sorry, but this guy is such a big name that we can't pass up this opportunity to play with him. He's going to maybe help us sell some tickets, etc." I was, really bummed out, but I said, "Look, he was very professional and cool about it. He said, I understand. Please keep me in mind for the future if anything else would arise again." Instead of calling him names and you jerk, how could you do that to me? He was very cool about it. So the band goes ahead and plays this gig, a couple of local gigs with this drummer, and it turns out this drummer wasn't prepared. He didn't learn the tunes well enough. He didn't do his homework, and the band didn't sound as tight. So they called my friend back up, and they said, "Look, we want you to take the tour after all." It didn't work out with this other guy. He got the gig. He went on tour. Got a cymbal endorsement, got a whole bunch of stuff come out of it for himself, and led to lots of recording work for him. So that was, and this was the guy who said to me, "Look, I had no control over that situation. All I could control was what I could do, what I could put in to prepare." And it worked, it showed, I think, to them that he was that dedicated. And, even though they didn't know who he wasn't a well-known drummer, didn't have the name, wasn't going to sell more tickets for them, but he was going to make their music sound better. And so they went with him. So I love that story because it's just a reminder that the hard work, gets the prize, or even not that it always does, but that's the way to go.
I mean, as you described, I don't think he could have prepared any better than what you said.
Exactly.
And you could feel a little defeated, but you know what? It came back to him, and that's such a beautiful story.
I know. I love it. It's a reminder for me, for all the things that I don't get. That the first place I look is why did what could I have done, that would have set me up for more success.
Right.
If I didn't play as well on the gig, was I prepared enough? If I didn't get the gig, the audition, if I didn't get the phone call when my friend got the phone call, to even try out for the band, what could I have done differently?
I think it was fair that either the director, whoever was leading that, actually told him honestly what it was.
Yeah.
Initially, so that all that work that he didn't feel like I still didn't get it. It was about a name drummer, and then it had to make him even more confident on, wow, I have to prepare like that all the time.
Yeah.
And for all of us and our students, that you never can prepare enough. And I always say that to all my kids. If you think you're practicing enough and preparing enough, somebody else is working harder than you right
Yeah,
now.
that's right. That's right. That's a good
And they're
point.
going to want it more. So, over my career at this point, I'm trying to think of, um, I, for me, it hasn't been as many auditions as it's been opportunities, I'd say,
Mm-hmm.
where I was given the opportunity, because when you were saying that, it was making me, I love having these discussions because it just brings up your mind Rolodex of your life. And
Right.
where I've had the opportunity to play in big band situations where a friend of mine's directing, and I got to play with Bob Mintzer and Randy Brecker on these really like big gigs. And the only thing I thought of was that when I found out I was playing with Mintzer, and I already had some of those charts in my own big band that I had, I went to work.
Yeah.
I mean, but he wasn't disclosing exactly what he was going to choose.
Mm.
So I had to like listen to everything I had of all his albums. I went through, all the charts that I had, and it's like it's Peter Erskine on most of those and whatever, and I'm like, and I was much younger than a lot of the guys in the band. A lot of them were from New York, and we get, and it was one rehearsal that afternoon, the gig that night, that was it. Boy, was I mean, all the emotions and just, look, you're nervous, but I'm like, I prepared, and then I'm looking at all the charts that they laid out when we got there, and I'm like, know that one, know that one, know that one. And we started to rehearse, and he turned around and gave me that look, and he smiled.
Oh,
I was like,
that's it. That's it. You're in. You're in.
yeah, and it just lightened my shoulders a little bit.
Yeah.
But it proves that point of, you could never prepare enough, and you got to be ready for anything that's going to happen in that moment. Any switches, and this is for the students, because one kid came in and said, oh, but the bass pedal didn't feel right, and at the audition, and the drums were a little bit different, because I've had this past weekend, both big high schools in Fairfield, Connecticut do this jazz dinner dance, and each high school is a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
They used one drum set from one of the schools, and one of my kids said, man, that drum set seemed bizarre, and this and that. I'm like, well, did you do what we talk about? Did you size it up, do your best? And you have to make that kit feel like you've been playing on it forever.
Right.
And just do what you need to do, and don't let, like you just said, that's out of your control.
Right.
They're not bringing your favorite drum kit in.
Right.
And that's something that we have to be challenged by a lot.
Mm-hmm. That's true, and that's a thing unique to drummers, right? I mean, you saxophone, trumpet, clarinet, tuba. You bring in your own instrument everywhere you go, but we have to play on instruments that aren't ours, and that's a unique challenge. And I always tell my students, the first thing you do when you sit down is set it up. Change the seat height, change the snare drum height, change the angle of the cymbals, whatever you need to do to make yourself comfortable, so that you don't, afterwards say, oh, I kept knocking into the floor tom rim because it was too high. Well, that's on you, right?
And if you are sharing the drum set, say it's a jazz regional and they pick two drummers, when you go to sit down, you deserve a moment, as you described, to readjust. For what if it takes 2 or 3 minutes? Maybe probably take a minute.
Right.
Raise the cymbal up. Do whatever you need to do. You want to play your best, and you would think most directors would respect that.
Certainly.
And understand. And I use that example, Jeremy, a lot to my kids. A trumpet player brings his trumpet, has his mouthpiece. It's like, oh, well, you can use your own trumpet, but you're going to use this mouthpiece.
Yeah, no.
So, we're at this disadvantage, but Max Roach said that to us at a jazz camp I did at Amherst College, at Jazz in July at University of Massachusetts. He's like, you never use that excuse. I don't care if I have to play on cardboard boxes tonight. I'm going to make those boxes sound amazing. And that's our job.
Right.
Sit down and make those drums.
Exactly.
Sit down and So I'll never forget when he said that. and it rides with me on every gig, no matter what kit I'm playing on. One of the dads said, "Oh, that drum kit you use for the recital or whatever, it sounds so amazing." And it's not because it's like a student performance kit, blah blah blah. It's not the super duper top of the line, but if I'm playing on it, I want to make that sound great.
Right.
It's going to be how you touch and how you play on that kit.
Yes.
You don't need to have a $5,000 drum kit and cymbals made of gold, to sound great. And that's a big lesson for all the kids, that no, it's about that you're prepared. You're getting all of your technique and everything is getting you to get great sound, and you're listening to everybody, and you're making music. That's the equipment. It could be something lower level. Okay, fine, but that might be what you get.
Yeah.
Make it happen. Don't complain about it. Just do it.
I heard Victor Lewis play on a piece of junk drum set, and man, those drums sounded amazing.
Yeah. I completely agree with that. Yeah.
So Steve Gadd played a clinic in Arizona. I'm sorry,
please.
Steve Gadd played a clinic in Arizona, and the guy's got his drum set up and tuned to it with the drum dials and got it all dialed in and sounding perfect. And they said he came in and he started playing it, and he took his drum key and he out-of-tuned all the toms and made them all wavy and just ruined the whole drum set, but he sounded amazing. And when they got on it, it sounded like crap. But then when he played it, it was amazing. So yeah, it's about how you touch it.
Right.
Absolutely.
My students often, even in lessons, they'll come and tell me, "Oh, I played this better at home because my bass drum pedal is more whatever, looser, tighter, more responsive." It's not more responsive, but whatever. I'm not used to the sound of the snare drum, so I didn't play that etude with the dynamics as good as I did at home. I was like, well, I'll buy that up to a very certain minimal point. Like, I know it's uncomfortable and it's disconcerting sometimes to play on a different instrument than what you're used to, but really, you've just got to make the adjustment. And I said, I could sit down at any drum set and feel comfortable within a minute. Okay, this is different. Okay, these skins are looser. I've got to lean into them more. I'm not going to get the same response. And this is all subconscious. I don't even think this stuff consciously. It's just, I just do, right? Oh, this pedal, the action's very loose, so I'm going to have to, adjust my foot control a little bit, my pedal technique. And these are just things I do. So when I sit down at the drums, I'm physically making those subconscious adjustments to make them sound the way I imagine I want it to sound. And you reach a certain point. What I tell my students who complain about that is, you reach a certain point with your technique where you can be the adjuster, and you can make the adaptation to the equipment to still make it sound good. And then you're not you're the boss of the drums, not the other way around, right? The equipment doesn't boss you around and tell you what you can and can't do. Once you reach a certain level, you can manipulate the equipment to make the sound that you want.
I completely agree. You play the drums, don't let them play you. Students say that comment probably to all of us, that when I was at home, I mean, how many times have you heard that? And I played it so great at home. And I said, well, first of all, you're not at home.
Yeah.
You're not in your comfort zone.
Right.
I'm not listening and watching you. Right. And so I said, well, why don't you do this? Why don't you record yourself? And then knowing you're recording yourself, you're going to play different, like somebody's watching you. So when you're asked, whether it's a jazz band or an audition or for me or for whatever, you're not going to feel so different than when you're at home. You have to come up with things that are going to test you. Otherwise, you're always going to feel that you want to say that.
That's right. Well, and like you say, the audition, what's the first thing that's going on is your adrenaline's pumping, right? And it's not pumping when you're sitting at home running through your stuff for the 5th and 6th time,
right?
Preparing and working hard. That's fine and good, but it's very different when you have to do it and all of a sudden it matters, right? Because there's no stakes at home. You're just practicing. but you get one shot at the audition. And that's what happened with my student who didn't get into the program. Is he just, it unnerved him to have to do it when it counted, and he had no experience doing that before, and he struggled.
Right.
He was nervous, and he wasn't comfortable. He hadn't prepared enough to be able to trust his abilities to carry him through.
Right.
And that's like you say, Jim, about putting them in unfamiliar environments. I like that. Sometimes what I'll do with my students is I'll say, okay, we're going to do a little mock audition now. And I change the lighting in the room. It sounds corny, I know, but I change the lights. I sit on the other side of the drum set instead of where I usually sit. And I say, I'm not going to say anything. This is going to be like a real audition. You can come in, you're going to say your name, you're going to say what pieces you're playing, and I'm going to sit here and take notes. And, they still know it's me. They still know it's not real, but it's closer. It's just a little bit to throw them off and make them be like, oh, this is somehow different. This is a little bit kind of mattering now. And then I give them feedback at the end, just like it was a real audition.
That goes right into when you were asking about what we do here. Leading up to the last couple of weeks, I do a mock audition with all my kids. And I'm like, we're not chatting. You can't ask any questions. We've been through what it's going to be. Right. And we'll chat when it's all over. And I do the same thing. We go through exactly what it's going to be. I take all the notes and I give them what that number was. Mm-hmm. They got to get above a 21 or 22, whatever that number needs to be. Well, Johnny, you got an 18. You need to get at least a 20 or 21 for a discussion. Mm. Now, what out of all that didn't go right? Oh, you missed that rudiment. You missed that scale. Your tuning on the timpani was a little bit off. Whatever it was. And if you don't take that resource and go back, I mean, over the last few weeks, if you take all that information, you should make it. You should make it.
Right. Especially when it's coming from you. I mean, you're doing the audition, but it's you they're going to be auditioning for, right?
Correct.
To get into your groups.
It's myself and Brian Enty, just so that we're getting two opinions, but
yeah, right.
We're like a half a point to a point always on target.
Right.
But then look, if there's a discussion, if somebody's really on the fence, then we can chat.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to play favorites or any of that.
I like that you brought that up about, there's two of us, and you guys are always on the same page and within a point of your same evaluation. But there will be times when you audition for a panel, let's say, when you go into, let's say you're applying to music school, college, and or for some, program, and you get very different takes. It's a subjective thing, right? There's some stuff that's objective, more like, did you play the part correctly? Did you play it in time? Did you rush? Did you speed up or slow down, kind of thing? Were your dynamics, where they were supposed to be if you're reading an orchestral piece, let's say. But, my son, Evan, who's a really accomplished jazz piano player, he auditioned for this program in New York City where they take the kids, they rehearse for 2 weeks under the guidance, it's a big band, under the guidance of some top, person. It's not Wynton, but it's somebody big like Wynton Marsalis. And then they tour the East Coast for 2 weeks. So it's a really competitive program. Kids from all around the country apply, and only, one piano player gets in, right? Or maybe it's two. And he didn't get in this year. But he auditioned with his video pieces and played his tracks, and he got the evaluations back from the panel of musicians that listened to the submissions, right? And it was really, I had to chuckle out loud because there was one of the tunes, it was a ballad he played. One of the guys said, I like how unhurried your phrasing was, and really blah, blah, blah. Nice phrasing on the ballad. And the other guy said, your phrasing felt very hurried and rushed to me on the ballad. Right. And so here was like a very specific point where two guys had almost opposite takes on their perception of it. Right. And that's a good thing to remember, this is art we're talking about. And though, there's, I guess you could say there's some parts of it that can be right or wrong. There's a lot of it, especially with jazz, but really with any style it's subjective. And it's, how did the thing make you feel? And what is the person's background who's perceiving it? I once had a student who was a really, really fine high school drummer, except he just didn't play with any, oomph, right? He didn't lean in the way I told him he had to. I went and saw his jazz band play at the local show. Not great, but he just wasn't present enough. He wasn't, in himself enough, wasn't confident enough. And I told him that. We worked on ways of, kind of leaning in more and playing with more assertiveness. And they went to one of those adjudicated festivals. I don't know if they have those out there back in the East Coast. Yeah. So all the regional jazz bands from high schools and middle schools go to some weekend-long festival at a local, sponsored by a local high school, and they all perform for like a panel of 3 judges, and they all get grades and they get marks and trophies and all that, and they hand out awards for outstanding soloists, kind of thing. And usually there's some guest, top professional guest to headline the show. And my student went to this thing with his jazz band, and he came back from it just totally dejected, and he said, "The guy told me I played too loud. And here you've been telling me, I got to play louder and louder." And here, he deducted points because he said the drummer was too loud. And I said, "Did you play the way you're normally playing before we've even worked on this? Like you played at your last concert?" He said, "Yes." And I said, "I don't think you played too loud." I mean, I wasn't there, but it's a subjective thing, is my point.
It depends on the room.
Yeah.
Right. I'll even say that to them. I mean, everywhere you perform, the drums are going to sound different.
Yeah.
And you have to quickly evaluate what they sound like. And again, whether it's drum set or any percussion, or this weekend our 2 of our steel bands are playing with the Greater Connecticut Youth Orchestra, and we're combining the groups that I work with there with our groups, so it'll be like a mass band. But we're playing this beautiful Klein Memorial Theater in Bridgeport, and I'm like, be ready. It's going to be like, a lot of volume in there. It's going to sound amazing, but it's not going to sound like where we're rehearsing.
Right.
And so yeah, it really could be subjective. Where in that room, somebody felt he was playing too loud.
Right.
Even if he was playing at his normal.
Right.
So it's readjusting maybe, but in that situation, obviously, as you described, is trying to get him to play with more intensity, but not volume.
Right. That's a good point. And they're not the same thing. And that's a lesson that I learned the hard way too. Intensity and volume, not the same thing. It's possible to play with terrific intensity, but very, very quietly. And if that's not something you're comfortable with, it's a really good thing to start working on.
Going back to Max Roach again, one of the things that he said was, you got to play with a quiet fire.
Yeah.
Oh, man, I take that with me all the time. Whether it's the underlying triplets on the snare drum, whatever he did, he goes, you just have that quiet fire underneath and play with intensity. I mean, oh my God, I'll never forget those 2 weeks. That was awesome.
Yeah, that sounds great.
So, but that's what you need there for sure. So.
And there's certainly lots of situations where you need the volume too, right? If you're going to go audition for, a heavy metal band, if you're going to go audition even for something like Green Day, you better hit the drums hard. You're playing Led Zeppelin cover band, you better hit the drums hard.
Yeah.
Because you could play with all the terrific finesse and technique in the world, but if you don't, bring that size, that of sound, that energy, that filling up the room, making them feel it in their bones, you're not going to get that gig either. So
right.
It all depends.
Yeah, a lot of playing depends on how deliberate you are, being very deliberate with what you're doing and confident with what you're playing.
Yes, that makes me think of there's a local high school, actually Evans High School jazz band director who said to me one time that he could tell when he auditions his drummers where they're at within 10 seconds. And what he's referring to is the way that they sound, the way that they interact with the instrument, and how much, do they play mousy? Do they play with confidence? Do they play like they're making the right kinds of sound for the music out of the drum set? And he said all the other stuff I know is going to follow from that. If I hear them playing with that kind of good touch and a good sound and a balanced sound on the parts of the drum set, I already know how their bossa nova is going to sound. I already know how their swing feel is going to sound. And when they come in and they play and the cymbals too loud, or the hi-hat's not snappy enough, or it's you know, they're kind of sound like they're playing with instead of drumsticks, they're playing with, you know, dead fish or something, you know. He knows where they're at just from how they sound. So I think that that's so important. Just the intent, like you just said, Chip, the intention that you play with, the deliberateness. You know, what are you trying to do when you're sitting down at the drum set? Are you a deer in the headlights, you know, just playing a pattern physically from memory, or are you making music happen? You're trying to make the sound of music happen. I totally agree with that. You know, I had a gig a couple of weeks ago with a piano trio, and there was a guest guitar player who we had not rehearsed with, who was a friend of the pianist, and he came in, really, really amazing guitar player. And he said to me, I could tell in 5 seconds, as soon as you started playing, that we were gonna make some good music tonight. And I took that as a tremendous compliment, because he was saying, I heard the way you sounded on the drums, and I said, this is gonna be a good night. So
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was a cool. I had forgotten about it till just now, but it's a reminder about how you sound, and again, just what you said, Chip, the intention, and you sit down to play your instrument, you know, what is your intention, and are you embodying that intention in your playing?
You just made me think of an experience that just happened this last month. I had an opportunity to play with a new trio that was recommended by a good friend of mine. And when I arrived, it was actually for a wedding, but it was a jazz trio. And he shook my hand and just said, well, you've got an amazing recommendation, blah, 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 blah. You know, that was the way he greeted me. And of course, I always want to bring it. But that felt good. So my goal was, like, because we were going to maybe rehearse just a couple things. And my goal was in a matter of seconds, make it sound relaxed and full. It's going to be basically a brushes night. And right away, it started to flow where you're giving everybody equal airspace in the time, so it floats. And that was my goal, to do that. And it started out that way. And then I noticed with my left foot, I started to feel a little pain because the piano player started to rush every time he soloed.
Mm.
So I had to make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm the new guy. Am I going to how do you are you going to hold him back? Are you going to give him a little bit of a give and take? Because at one point, the bass player, who was the leader, you know, at the end of one of the songs said, hey, Jim, I feel like, you know, tempos are pushing a little bit. Let's keep it back. So I'm glad that he said that, because it wasn't my band to really make that decision. And I was trying to just be fair to both sides.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy was a good piano player, but he would just start taking off, and it would be like, oh. So by the end of that night, with the people I normally play with all the time, that we have an understanding of where it is, and I'm not feeling that left foot, the pain, because you're trying to hold that 2 and 4 back or whatever. But it's making that adjustment and thinking about, okay, you know, I would like to work with these guys again or whatever. So what are you going to do? What's going to be your choice?
Right.
Are you going to be a professional and figure it out, talk about it? But so I did talk about it with the bass player on the break. And he said, I completely understand it, and I appreciate that we met in the middle.
Well, you know, that you bring up another point which we haven't touched on about related to auditioning, which is being flexible, right? You know, you may have been given a set of things that you're supposed to have prepared, and then they're on the gig and they want to call something else that you haven't played. What are you going to do? So, no, I'm not going to do that because I didn't prepare that. Or are you going to go with the flow and do your best and say, you can say, yeah, I don't know that one, but I'm game, right? You know, yeah, I think that's so important. And, you know, when you're auditioning for a band, it's not just like a kid going into a program, or, you know, you're auditioning for a college with a panel but if you're auditioning for a band, you know, you're not just auditioning as a drummer, you're auditioning as a person. And, you know, it's not just that they're auditioning you, you're also auditioning them. And so you could get there and the scene could be not cool. They could be doing drugs, or they could be, making jokes that are too off color for you or whatever. If the personalities don't mesh, it's not going to be a good fit. You don't want that gig if it doesn't feel like the right fit for you. And it might be none of those things. It could all just be musical, I assume you know what you're going into, but like the way they work, right? I've been in rehearsals with bands that have ranged the complete spectrum in terms of how hard and disciplined and focused they are versus how loose and relaxed and full of jokes and kind of slop time that they are. Mm-hmm. And, I have my own way that I'm going to run my rehearsal, but which is, pretty focused with a little bit of balance, some levity and some time to just chat and whatnot. But some rehearsals are like, you're there to work. You're not wasting time with anything else but work. And other times, if you're the uptight guy, then like, oh, okay, man, this is rehearsal. We're just, we're taking our time. This is just about the vibe. We're getting the vibe with the band. And so, you got to read that when you're going in for an audition, and sometimes making some jokes and ingratiating yourself and going with the flow, that can be the thing that connects you to the band even more than the music. And then, right. Oh, I really like that guy. He was really fun. And I can imagine having a good relationship with him. Right. Or he was so uptight, so, that's an important piece of the puzzle, is just understanding the vibe of the session or the audition when you're going to it, the tryout for the band, let's say, and not assuming it's going to always go one way or another.
Oh, well, as I said earlier, it's an opportunity sometimes, but it is an audition, because I think their drummer was having some physical issues that they normally use. But it is an opportunity and an audition at the same time.
Right.
And I'm a people person, and I want to know about who you both are. And and it takes a little effort. Yeah. You know what I mean? If it's that kind of audition where you get to know everybody a little bit, and on a break you don't just like go off in a corner. You actually strike up some conversation. And that was one of the comments that came back, was that, boy, you're such a nice guy and you're really easy to get along with.
There you go.
Well, that's a huge part of the whole puzzle.
Yeah, that's certainly the guy that I'd rather have in my band, than the guy who's off on his own, doesn't interact, doesn't give us eye contact, is on his phone the whole time and nailed the music, but doesn't seem like the kind of guy I want to spend a lot of time with.
Right. And
right. Yeah, he's definitely not going to like the guy that insists that the piano player stays in time and ruins the song at the cost of that. You know what I mean? He's not going to dig that.
Right. And so a little bit of, and it's not that you're being insincere, but you want to throw some real sincerity out on music and about what people are doing, because I never rehearsed with these guys before. We never played till that gig.
Right.
But on that level, we should be able to walk in and make that happen. And what was interesting on that gig was, and they had the tune list, and I went through the tune list. Normally you're doing a lot of jazz standards. They were doing like a Wayne Shorter tune and some things that were a little odd for me in that type of scenario, but we actually made them work. And I thought that was interesting, so I listened to every song that was on that list. And, like we've had these volumes of songs that we've listened to all these years. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that Wayne Shorter tune back in that time period when I was listening. And it was, excuse me, kind of cool to like sort of get back to that and make it happen in a jazz trio.
Right.
Go with it. Go with it. Do it.
All right. Well, we're reaching the end of our hour here, you guys. Thanks so much for tuning in, and feel free to comment even after the broadcast is on Facebook. We'll see your comments after the fact. We'll be back here next week. Thanks to Jim Royal for being our guest host today. We missed you, Chip and Bart.
Thank you, Jim.
You're welcome.
It's my pleasure. And hope everybody has a great day.
Take care.